Yesterday we talked about finding LCM, least common multiple, and GCF, greatest common factor. And the way that we did this was by using the listing method. Today I am going to introduce you to a new way, a better way, to find both LCM, GCF, and a simplified version of a fraction. This method is called the cake method. And you will see in a little while perhaps where they get this name from. So first, let's review what LCM and GCF means. So if I am talking about the LCM and GCF of the numbers 10 and 15, your multiples of 10, you would list them 10, 20, 30, 40, and then you would list your multiples of 15, 15, 30, 45, 60, and you're finding your least common multiples, so you want the smallest that they have in common, and the smallest that they have in common is 30, so that would be your LCM. For greatest common factor, you would list your factors, and those are numbers that you can divide the number evenly by. And the numbers that you can divide 10 evenly by are 1 and 10, 2 and 5. The numbers that you can divide 15 by evenly are 1 and 15, 3 and 5. And then you look for the one that they both have in common, and you look for the greatest, and the biggest number that they both have in common is 5. That's the listing method. Now, let me introduce you to the cake method. For the cake method, you place both numbers side by side and you look for common numbers that you can divide these by. If you look at the numbers 10 and 5, use those divisibility rules. They both end in a 0 or a 5, so you know that you can divide them both by 5. So, divide them both by 5. It's like an upside down division problem. 10 divided by 5 leaves you with 2. And 15 divided by 5 leaves you with 3. So now you're looking at the numbers 2 and 3. There is nothing in common that you could divide both of those by. So you have divided every common factor out. Your greatest common factor is this number on the side. So your GCF of 10 and 5 is 5. Your LCM, the LCM starts with the letter L, so you always want to multiply the numbers that make up your L. And if you multiply all of those numbers in the L, you get 5 times 2, which is 10, times 3, which is 30. So your LCM is 30. Now, the other part of this, if you were looking at 10 and 15 as a fraction, if you would simplify that, you would simply get these two remaining numbers on the end, and your simplified version is 10/3. You can do all three of those by using the cake method. Let's do another one. If we are looking at the numbers 24 and 30, I want to find the GCF and LCM of 24 and 30. So we're going to start with our numbers. We're going to put them next to each other with enough space in between. And then you want to look for easy numbers that you can divide both of these by. I'm going to use my divisibility rules. This ends in a 4 and this ends in a 0. They're both even, so I know that I can divide them both by 2. If I divide 24 by 2, I have 12. And if I take 30 divided by 2, I'm left with 15. And then I want to check and make sure that I'm done, that I have divided everything in common from both of them. So the numbers 12 and 15, I can divide those both by 3. So if I divide 12 by 3, I'm left with 4. And 15 divided by 3 is 5. So now I'm looking at the numbers 4 and 5. There is no common factors of 4 and 5 besides 1. You don't really want to divide anything by 1 because the result is the number itself. So I have done as much as I can. So your greatest common factor are all the numbers that they have in common, and they had 2 numbers in common, which were 2 and 3. So all you do is multiply those. So my greatest common factor is everything along the side, which is 2 and 3. So you multiply those, and you get 6. Then my least common multiple, remember, starts with the letter L, so I multiply everything in the L. Well, I've already done 2 times 3, which is 6, and if I do 4 times 5, that's 20. 6 times 20, if I use my rules of multiplying with a 0, 6 times 20, all I do is 6 times 2, which is 12, and then I add that 0 on the end. So my least common multiple is 120. That may be easier than listing all of these out. And then remember that you can always find your simplified fraction by what's left over on the bottom. So if you had the fraction 24/30ths, if you look at the bottom, that would be 4/5. All right, let's do one more. Cake method. Cake method for the numbers 50 and 100. So put those numbers next to each other. You can divide both of those by 2. 50 divided by 2 is 25. 100 divided by 2 is 50. You have numbers that end in 5 and 0, so you know that you can divide them by 5. 25 divided by 5 is 5. 50 divided by 5 is 10. I still have numbers that end in 5 and 0, so I'm going to divide by 5 again. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2. And that's it. That's as far as I can go. So again, your greatest common factor are all of the factors that they shared, so it's everything on the side, and then you simply multiply. 2 times 5 is 10, times 5 is 50, so my greatest common factor is 50. And then for my LCM, you multiply the L. I've already done this part. I already know that it's 50. 50 times 1 is the same thing, 50, times 2 is 100. So my LCM is 100. And again, you don't really need to know this yet, but it's helpful. But if your fraction was 50 over 100, that would simplify to your remaining numbers down at the bottom. And your remaining numbers at the bottom are 1 and 2, so your fraction would be 1/2. Again, you can find all 3 of those using the cake method.